Hi everyone, I'm really excited. Today I got a special guest for you on this interview talking to Dr. Olina. So she's from my gather British, but she's living in Spain with 4 children, and she's a doctor turned a healthy life coach. So which I find very fascinating. So first of all, welcome Dr. Olina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm really excited because, what you do is something I really care about because I'm generally quite health conscious. I also have a little one. So that fascinates me what you do. And I have a bunch of questions to ask you, and I think my audience would love to hear from you too. But first of all, I work with a lot of people who are going through transition. So sometimes it's about career change, could be about relocation, starting a family, basically a new chapter in life. And I find that what you did, having 4 kids, living in Spain, and clearly you sound like British to me, and also you transition from a doctor to a health life coach. So you've gone through many transitions. I'm just curious, so what prompted you to do what you do now? So tell us a little bit about your background and all the fascinating things.
Okay, well, I have to say, first of all, I wish I had met you years ago because there was definitely a time when I needed somebody to help me with my transitions. So I think the story starts when, years ago, I always wanted to live abroad. And in fact, I actually came and worked in Australia for a bit in Brisbane and loved it.
Me too.
Yes, years ago. And so I always wanted to travel, and I always wanted to not live in the UK. And to cut a very long story short, eventually in 2011, I went, that's it. I'm going to move to Spain with my husband and my children. But because we were in the European Union, I thought, I could just work as a doctor there. And I can work as a doctor here, but it's slightly complicated. And it was this long story of I came to Spain and found I would have to do more training, and it was more difficult than I thought. So that was the transition time for me. And then the second 2 children, numbers 3 and 4, they came later on. So there was definitely this period of transition where I was transitioning from my identity as a doctor and not wanting to let go of that. I say I accidentally lost my career. And that's true on one level, but then I accidentally found another amazing career. So it's fine. And that was the transition. And the transition to help to become a health coach came more gradually, I think. I started off doing healthy eating and picky eating for kids because, my own children were picky. And I remembered when I was a doctor working with pediatric kids that people would come and say, my child is constipated. And I would say, feed them vegetables. It's really easy. Except that when I became a parent, I realized that it wasn't so easy. You give them the vegetables and they don't eat them. And so I did a lot of work on that, partly because it was my own struggle. And it was very important to me that my children ate healthily, yet all they wanted to do was eat sweets and cakes.
Or pasta and rice. You're lucky they don't throw vegetable back at you. I've seen kids.
They did.
My daughter loved pasta, like plain pasta. You make beautiful sauce, vegetable, and whatever. She just wanted pasta.
Yeah, exactly. And so I looked at this, how to make healthy habits for children. And it does depend on the children. And so after a while, I think I decided to pivot to adults because, for many reasons, partly because I think for me, that is my passion of showing people how we can live a healthy life and we can reduce so many illnesses just by eating healthily and exercising and thinking, getting our emotional health sorted out. And that gives us so many benefits. And so many people don't realize that. So many people think, this illness happens to me and I'm helpless to do anything about it. And that's just not the case. So that is my passion. But also it goes in hand with teaching your kids, because the bottom line is if you aren't doing that yourself, you're not going to be able to teach your kids. So I found that I came up against a brick wall when a lot of people wanted me to help them teach their children not to be picky, but really their diets weren't very good. And I realized that we had to go back to the drawing board and get their diets and their healthy eating sorted before they could sort out their children's healthy eating.
Wow, fascinating. I have already so many questions from what you just said. So starting from the very beginning, first of all, actually really interesting because you worked in Brisbane, you said years ago, and same for me. I actually moved, I was originally from Hong Kong, but I moved to Norway to study. But then I lived in London for 5 years. And then from London, I moved to Brisbane. So who knows, maybe we're in Brisbane at the same time. So I kind of you know what, first of all, I backtrack a little bit. Why I wanted to share with you my background is because I found it interesting that, you know, you wanted to travel and you wanted to move, and I know how UK it's like. It's beautiful, but it's cold, and a lot of people don't fancy the weather. And Spain, it's definitely very sunny. It's one of the most beautiful country you can live in. So I can understand, you know, you wanted to move there. But you know what, an exercise. Like, you move with 2 children and uproot, you know, your profession also, you know, and your husband, and it just whole, you know, moving, it must be quite an adventure. Like,
was an adventure. And I think this was one of the things that I really struggled with, because on the outside, my friends in the UK would be like, oh, you're living on holiday and your life is all peaches and cream. But the reality of actually going into a different culture, as I'm sure you're aware, is not the case. You know, normal life happens and mundane things happen. And so although you're living in this holiday area and loads of people come here on holiday, it is a tourist destination. But then all those other things, like, at the time, my children were really young and I wanted to find mothers groups, and there weren't any mothers groups, and I wanted to find friends, and it was really difficult for me to make friends. So all of that was really difficult. And I know a lot of people move out here and then they move back because they find it difficult trying to create that perfect life within your perfect life.
Yeah, how interesting. I mean, yes, we're going to talk about healthy eating, everybody, but you know why I want to bring this up is because, you know, sometimes, you know, when I say in transition, is that something happened and kind of call us to drop our life and move to another country or take a new job or a business or whatever that is. And, you know, it usually uneasy, like there will be challenges, but somehow it's kind of like, it's a that's like, you know, it's destined to happen, or something that pushes you and you have to overcome it. And now clearly you still stay in Spain. So I find it really interesting. Sometimes we, you know, maybe people who having long time having like a poor eating habits, maybe something happened in their life, they're pushed into one direction, so they needed to seek help. It's the same thing. Sometimes, you know, things happen in our life and then we get on this journey or this adventure. We may not be totally volunteering it. Sometimes we do, and then realize it's not what it seems. It's actually a lot harder. I find it really interesting. And you know, early on you mentioned that how you gave up your career or something to move. But I
accidentally lost my career.
Yes, accidentally lost your career. And you know, the funny thing is, I heard once I was in Hong Kong. I somehow bumped into a group of monks and we became friends. And one of them told me he accidentally became a monk. And I'm like, oh, how do you accidentally? Because the story, but I get that accidentally, you know, it kind of just happened. But you know, you find a different calling in life. And when we enter different life stage, sometimes that may become your passion, that becomes your direction. And I find it awesome to be able to connect with you now, because, you know, what you're doing now really helps a lot of people. And which led into my second question, which is, so you mentioned that, you know, you start working with kids and the first aider, but then you realize you actually have to help the adult first. So what are the common obstacles you tend to see when you want to start helping people who come to you and say, hey, look, I really want to improve my health? You know, sometimes what people say is one thing, and then they tell you I eat healthy, and then you ask them to tell you what they eat, and you're like, So tell me some of those common obstacle or things that you face, and maybe some of the advice you can give to people.
Okay, so I think most people come because they want to lose weight, because that's the problem that they perceive is the problem, whereas what I perceive is healthy eating. And I think I always say nutrition is really personal, and it's about finding what works for you. There are so many different ways to lose weight. There are so many different things out there that you can do, and this fad and that fad, and a lot of them do work. But it's about finding what suits you. So, you know, you were talking earlier about, you know, when January comes and we're all really geared up and we have this kind of determination to make things happy, to make things happen. And then by April, we're like, oh, I can't do this. But it's about finding something that you really do enjoy, which is easy and fun and can keep you going for a long period of time. And for most of my clients, I recommend the Mediterranean style diet because it's got a lot of research behind it. And because you can make tweaks to the kind of way you eat already. And, you know, you can therefore eat the things that you like and the things that you're used to eating. So that's one thing. I think it's about having this idea of nutrition and what really are being clear of what you're going to eat and what you're not going to eat, and how those foods impact what you're eating. Because a lot of people, they go, oh, I eat healthily, and they're not really being honest with themselves, I think. Or they're just, sometimes people just don't have the nutritional understanding. So that's one big thing. And another big thing, again, in the same line, is about finding habits that work for you. And again, coming back to knowing what works for you and how it works for you. So, you know, I can tell you to go and exercise, but if I tell you, like, I love swimming, if I say, oh, you have to do swimming, and you hate swimming, you're never, ever going to go swimming. So it's about finding the habits that work for you. And there's a lot of research, actually, which is very interesting, about people who have healthy habits. And the people who have healthy habits aren't people who are more disciplined. I would love to say I'm really super disciplined and I have all these healthy habits, but it's not true. The reason some people have healthy habits is because they set their life up in a way so that it's easy for them to have healthy habits. So, for example, I go swimming. I love swimming, and I know that I do things in a group much better than if I do things by myself. So I go to swimming training, and that habit happens for me on Tuesday and Thursday. I walk my children to school, and then I walk down to the swimming pool, and I do my swimming, and I do the thing in reverse. Now that habit starts when I leave the door here. And so it's really difficult for me to then go, I can't be bothered to go swimming, because then I have to make such a huge mental effort to go and find something else to do. But I've set my life up to do this. Another good example is that we are very lucky here, and we have beautiful farmers markets. So on Sunday, I go to the farmer's market and buy loads of vegetables. Now, there isn't much else for me to buy. So whatever I buy in that farmer's market is healthy and good, as opposed to if I go to the supermarket, which I do sometimes, and I've taught myself to go, like, you know, with blinkers on and not look at all the packaged foods. But if I go to the supermarket, I know that I buy more packaged food, so I go to the market. So those are examples of how you can set your life up with a little bit of understanding of how you work. So I think those are the two things. Knowing what your nutrition likes and dislikes are, and being realistic about what is healthy and what isn't healthy, and then setting up your life with habits. A third thing I would quickly say is your underlying thinking and understanding what it is that drives those habits. So, you know, thinking about, I'm bored, I'm going to go to the fridge. Most people don't realize that's happening, but you can open that up and think, I now see that I'm bored and I'm going to the fridge.
Well, I love it. Like, precisely. I mean, the first point when you talk about, you know, understanding of yourself and a bit of education as well, I think it's key, because if you don't have some basic knowledge and you don't understand yourself, it's like you don't know where you are. You kind of know where you want to go, but what are we doing, right? So, and I love what you said earlier on, that you like to recommend a Mediterranean diet. And I think it's lovely because you live in Spain. So obviously the food, the vegetables and all this stuff, it's kind of like, yeah, you will be easy to, you know, find accessible. Like years ago, I came across microbiotic diet. I don't know where you know, but I was living in Czech Republic, where it is not living there, but I spent a lot of time in Czech Republic, like Eastern Europe. But macrobiotic diet comes from Japan. So can you imagine how hard it is to get seaweed? So yeah, exactly. That's something like, you know, you need to learn a little bit about food and nutrition. You need to know about yourself, but also like where you are. And that applies to so many different things. And I love your habits and set yourself up for success. And I think it's like, you know, whether it's a health coach or what I do with people in transition, setting yourself up for success is exactly that. You know, you're building in the habits. I love what you said about, you know, it's so hard for you not to go swimming because you're already out of the door. What are you going to do? Like, it'll be very hard. And, you know, also I love group fitness, and sometimes you make friends, you go to a place, it becomes social as well. So there's so many things we can do to actually make our lifestyle a lot healthier and happier. But that requires a bit of effort, but not necessarily like the dieting effort, but planning and thinking about it, which fantastic. I love what you said. And so going back into you know, the 3 really helpful tips about having a healthy habit. So So say I have a young daughter, so and I do think I have a pretty healthy lifestyle. And now she's not particularly fussy like we said earlier on, but I do think that sometimes the children like sweets and cookies, and even though I don't eat a lot of them, my husband kind of like them. So I find it a little bit hard to what do we do about it? Like, how to establish like good modeling for children, and what are the key things you will advise like
Okay.
moms?
So I hear what you're saying. So I think the first thing that I would recommend, and I hear you saying you have good habits, so that's fabulous. But I think the best thing is that you have healthy habits yourself, because you can't teach your children to eat healthily if you aren't eating healthily yourself. So that's the number one thing. And the honest truth is that if you have healthy habits and you eat as a family in that healthy way, your children are going to create those habits. In fact, there was an interesting study that was done recently, and they looked at students who went off to university. And in the first term, all these students went and ate junk food and all of those things, this taste of freedom. And then in the second term, they all started going back to the way that they had been taught at home, just going back to home cooking after the novelty of freedom had worn off. So that's the first thing. Then if we look at children, there are two different types of children ways that they can eat. And firstly, you have your picky eaters. And these are children, and there's obviously a spectrum of picky eaters. Most children go through a phase of picky eating in their toddler years. And some of those will have very, much more difficult to cope with picky eating. And some of those, it's just literally a phase. So it kind of depends where your children are on those ones. If your child is very picky, you have to be very careful not to push them to eat things that they don't like, because this just creates a fight. And it just makes the whole situation work. The other extreme that you have are children who will eat anything. And those seem like they are good for parents, because they don't give you this, oh my goodness, I can't find anything that my children will eat. And they're happy to eat various other things. The problem with those children is they are more likely to carry on eating and eat anything. So you have to be very careful that you steer them towards healthy options and teach them how to stop eating. So going back to your question about sweets, and I do think having a limit of sweets is a good idea. And that, you don't limit what your children can eat, but you say to them, look, you can eat as much fruit and vegetables, the healthy stuff, as you want. And then for the sweets and treats, we have those occasionally. And the advice I tend to give people is based on advice by a website called the Infant Toddler Forum, which is run in the UK. And it's a very interesting one. And they look at portion sizes for children. And a lot of adults think that portion sizes need to be much bigger than children need, because we just don't realize how small the children need. And so their advice is to allow children to have one like cookie or biscuit a day. And it's a small cookie. It's not like half a packet of cookies. And then if you're talking about candy or chocolate, one portion once a week. And that'll be like 2 or 3 small sweets. It's not a packet of sweets. It's a small amount of sweets. And so it's obviously, we don't want to say you can't have any of these treat foods, but it's about getting it in perspective and going, okay, those are treat foods. And the reason we eat those foods is not because we need the calories in those foods. Those are just because we enjoy them. And really, the reason to eat food is to maintain us. So for children to grow and for adults to give us energy, but often we confuse the two, and we eat because we enjoy eating. And that's fine as long as you don't do too much of it.
See, like, I completely agree with you. And usually I find my daughter pretty okay when I'm alone with her. We eat sensibly. Basically, she just eat what I eat. The problem is my husband. That he has a sweet tooth. He tried to hide that he eats ice cream sometimes, or he tried to sort of not letting her know what he's up to, because she's going to ask for one because she's seeing him eating a chocolate biscuit or having ice cream. And then sometimes obviously we kind of avoid it. We give her a little bit. But the problem is sometimes I find is that she know it's there. So let's say daddy's not around, daddy's not eating it. Sometimes she forgets, and that's okay. When she see daddy having it, she's asking for it. But sometimes she just remember. And then because she know it's in the house, then she start to ask for it, she starts to have a tantrum. And that's when I find it a little bit difficult, that I don't want to deprive her. I don't want this fight to continue, but I don't want this to develop as a habit. So at the moment, I'm asking my husband, try not to eat it.
Well, there are two issues there. And I think, firstly, it is very difficult. If you have somebody who has bad eating habits and they don't want to change those eating habits, that does make it more difficult. But the other question there is, so when she has a tantrum, what is going on with that tantrum? Like you're saying, I want to avoid that tantrum, but why do you want to avoid that tantrum? That's her pushing the boundaries and saying, I want that sweet. And I know it's difficult when children have a tantrum, but there is just an answer. No, it's not dessert night tonight. We're not having sweets. So in our house, our general rule is that we have desserts on Friday and Saturday. And of course, my children ask all the time, can we have desserts? Can we have sweets at other times? And if I just go, no, it's not, sometimes I say yes, but, often I just go, no, that's it. And they will push and push and push because they're testing that boundary. But if you just go, well, no, because, it's not today. We're not having it today. It's for Friday or whenever. If they know when they're allowed those treats and you just go, no, it's not that. Well, she can have a tantrum. It's not pleasant. I appreciate that. But if you give in to her tantrum and allow her to have the treats because she's had the tantrum, then next time, what's she going to do when she wants the treat?
Yes.
And it is difficult.
Yeah, so far she hasn't been mastering this yet. So I still have a chance. So I think consistency is important. So if we say Friday night is treat night, then we stick to it. And then Thursday comes, no ice cream. So I definitely agree that consistency is important. And love sometimes say yes, sometimes say no. So I can say no to her, but then say in the public or when there are guests around, the tantrum can be a little bit difficult. But I agree, like I try to distract her or find way to, neutralize the threat. But I do agree that the consistency is important. And having a better healthy habit definitely helps in the house.
I'm reading a book called The Danish Way of Parenting, and it's very interesting at the moment. And one of the things they say in that book, which I really love, is that in Denmark, instead of calling it the terrible twos like we do in English-speaking language, they call it the boundary pushing age. And I think once you get that mindset of that young children, what their job is to constantly push the boundaries, then suddenly it makes you see the whole situation in a different light. Because instead of thinking, oh, she's screaming and I have to stop her screaming and I don't want her to scream, you just think, she's just testing the boundaries. This is just her. This is what she does. That's her job, to constantly test the boundaries. And it's my job to set the limits. And then suddenly it all just becomes easier. And I wish I had known that several years ago.
And that's actually the two questions here. One is that I do find different culture have different understanding. I think in a Chinese culture, especially when times were hard, there was a lot of pushing kids to eat because, don't stay hungry. And also with one child policy in China, like I was in Hong Kong growing up, so I don't really have that. But in China, the one child policy definitely make, people kind of allow kids to do what they want. So that's a little bit harder. But I find the different cultural aspect is interesting that, they have different parenting style and different rules. And I would say, like, for Chinese, I think we're a little bit more trying to get them eat as much as we can. So, and we're not particularly strong on the no and boundary, but, I think learning different culture also is interesting, to learning different style of parenting. And then you mentioned you have 4 kids, right? So what about like when one start to push the boundary? Do they like sort of together became a united front or a protesting group?
Yes. And also the thing I see with 4 children is if one of them is a little bit grumpy and then they shout at somebody else, then they shout at someone. And so suddenly I will have 4 children screaming, and it is difficult. And I always say that my children have been the catalyst in helping me do a lot of work on myself. And it's thanks to my children that I've really worked on my own emotions. Because, before having children, I didn't really have any issues with anger or frustration or any of these sort of what we call negative emotions. And now I have children, I'm like, oh my goodness, I am very frustrated with my children. And working on that is interesting and important. And also working on my children and their emotions but remembering that they're children and they have emotions. And although we want to not control our emotions, but allow our emotions out, we need to do that in a way that is acceptable to society, and teaching our children how to do that. But that's a process that takes years and years. They don't have that at the age of 6 or 9 or 11. They're beginning to learn it in the same way that a lot of adults don't have that control over their emotions as well. Control isn't the right word. It's not about controlling your emotions. It's about allowing your emotions and not being controlled by them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think understanding your emotions and understanding, sometimes an emotion, first of all, it's not true. Like sometimes you feel one thing, you feel angry, but it could be something related to something else, then it just somehow happening, like expressing now. So that's not true. But I want to shift gear a little bit before we finish up. I want to ask you, since you're here, that we're all busy moms, right? And we're all trying to do our best to have a healthy eating household. So is there any tips that you can give us so that we can master this a little bit better when we're time poor? Like what could be some really good planning or habit that you recommend so for us busy moms can try to still maintain a healthy lifestyle for ourselves and the family?
Sure. So I think there's two things. First of all, I think prioritizing yourself is a really good thing for women to do, because you cannot show up for your kids and you cannot do all of these things if you put yourself at the bottom of the pile and you're not looking after yourself. So if you are tired and exhausted and you're not exercising and you don't have time to cook, it just doesn't work. You have to prioritize yourself. That's my number one tip. And then the other thing I would say is really important is just keep it easy and fun and think about how easy it can be. And what I say is, what you want to be doing is giving your children lots of vegetables. It's all about fruit and vegetables. And I hear lots of people say, oh, my kids don't eat vegetables. Well, but you're eating the vegetables and they're seeing the vegetables. And most children will eat fruit. And fruit, you don't want to eat loads and loads and loads of fruit, but fruit is definitely better than packaged foods. So it's really easy. Fruit and vegetables are really easy. So for example, on a Friday night when you think, I want to have frozen pizza, and I just don't have time to cook, so it's frozen pizza. Well, then frozen pizza with some broccoli and some carrots and some peas, and suddenly that frozen pizza is not disastrous. It's a little treat, but you've also got all those vegetables too. So there are lots of ways of making things fun and easy and working them into your routine.
Yeah, so I love that. I agree. Like sometimes, it can be like you can still give them the treat like the pizza or a hamburger night, but then you make sure you get a salad on the side or you're having some vegetables to nibble on. So that's really good tip. But I also think that, we often think packaged food or go to supermarket or just do something quick. Actually, you know what? If you buy just not like, as it is fruit and vegetable, they're really easy to serve up. I think sometimes the illusion to think if we go to a supermarket, it's going to solve our problem.
Yeah, and the other issue I see quite a lot as well is because we rely so heavily on packaged fruits, firstly, they contain a lot of sugar and salt, and that really trains our taste buds to want sugar and salt. So as we're giving our children loads and loads of packages, what we're basically saying is these fruit and vegetables, they don't taste anything. I did this taste experiment once. It was Easter years ago, and Easter is our strawberry season, and we had these beautiful strawberries, so delicious, so amazing. And I bit into one and it was just a bubble of amazing flavor. And then because it was Easter, I had some chocolate, which was hugely sweet. And then I tried the strawberry again, and the strawberry was sour and horrible. It was the same strawberry, but because my mouth was so full of sugar, it feels really horrible. And that's what we're doing to our kids. So when you have these taste buds, which just are used to sugar and salt the whole time, the fruit and vegetables pale in comparison. But after a while, if you reduce the amount of packaged foods, the sugar and salt and all those other things they put in them, and you give them fruit and vegetables, they will just eat the fruit and vegetables because they're more used to them. And if that's I'm not suggesting you starve your children, but if that's what's on offer, they will eat them.
Yeah,
obviously some that they won't eat. I'm not saying if your children doesn't like broccoli, give them broccoli the whole time, because clearly, that's not a great way of doing things. But if you give them a variety of fruit and vegetables, and they may not like broccoli, but they'll eat peas and carrots,
Mm. And what I tend to do, I will sneak in, say, if I make a bolognese sauce type of thing. Actually, we hardly cook meat, so we have vegetarian version of bolognese. But then we definitely chop up carrots, sweet corn, or zucchini, or even little bits of broccoli. And they don't really appear like anything, but they're in there. So it's like, we sneak in vegetables all the time. So I
I think you
quite
need
like
to
that.
get the balance right with that. So sometimes that's a great method for, if you're worried that your children don't have vegetables. And it's getting the balance right of showing them the vegetables so they get used to this idea of eating vegetables and also thinking about what they're actually consuming.
Yeah, so I think it's the same thing, like, because I say I would love to eat broccoli just like this, and I steam some broccoli. So seeing me eating it, then she's also going to pick one and eat it. And I think it's important that, if you don't eat any broccoli, it's very hard for your kids to want to eat broccoli unless they really develop the taste buds. So we just kind of have to model.
Yes, exactly.
So fantastic. I think I'm getting a lot of health tip here in terms of how to run a healthier household, but also for myself, like, some of this habit thing, it's actually really cool just to think, yeah, like if I have a habit of dropping her to childcare or school and then go to do swimming or exercise or then go to the farmer's market, yeah, that habit will become such a great routine. So we share a lot of really fantastic tips. I really love it. So I know you actually see people, your private client as a health coach, a health life coach. So tell us, how can we find you? What would be the best way to get in touch with you if people want to work with you?
Well, if they want to work with me, they can just email me at orlina@drorlina.com. But I have a podcast, so most people listen to the podcast first, and there I talk about, mostly I talk about how lifestyle changes have an impact. So, and it's really interesting that out of all of the things I talk about, so I might talk about heart disease or reducing your risk of cancer or osteoporosis, but actually all the lifestyle things that you can do are the same. And it all boils down to eating healthily and exercising and being more mindful. So the podcast is, where you can find more information about me and
Fantastic.
Just email.
So your podcast, what's the name of the podcast people want to find you on iTunes or other podcast catcher?
It's Fit and Fabulous, but there are, I think there might be more than one Fit and Fabulous. So it's also on my website, which is drorlina.com, which is ORLENA.
Yes, and I will have a link at the bottom of this on the blog post. It's also, when people go through the podcast, they can see at the bottom. So I will have your website there, and people can just search for your name and Fit and Fabulous as a podcast on iTunes as well. So fantastic. Thank you. I got a lot out of this, and I'm actually already really excited to go into the kitchen and see what I can make healthy and delicious for my family tonight.
Fabulous. And then come and share. Let me know what your easy recipes are. I have so many easy recipes. I don't do anything that's complicated.
Oh yeah, that would be great. So will people be able to get easy recipe from your website as well, right?
No, I don't do recipes on my website actually, because I have lots. I'm happy to share them with people, but I'm not a food photographer, so I don't do the recipe. But I do just collect them in my mind.
Fantastic. So thank you for today. And I hope our listeners or people who watch this will get a lot out of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.